we have, think what you want about Vivek. At this point, I really don't care. I didn't care that much before. Certainly don't care now because it doesn't take long if you are truly a conservative and you actually understand what it is we're supposed to be conserving as conservatives. It doesn't take long to listen to him, to read about him, to read what he has said, to realize that one, he gains very little by being very open about his thoughts that align with conservative thinking.
That's very true.
But secondly, in my lifetime, I have never seen anyone speak our values so clearly, unapologetically as I did with Vivek. And so, I will always support him. I think he's an amazing person and would be a huge asset in this administration.
Yeah, I was telling people, I said, look, I mean, Vivek's this. He sounds like Obama. I said, he sounds like Obama. When did Obama ever say he wanted to gut 75% of the bureaucracy? I've never heard Obama. But he used the line in the debate states or whatever. People could do things differently. But I always looked at who he was surrounding himself with and who was involved in the campaign. And it was all either conservatives like you or people who were attached to, prominent conservatives a cycle ago. And I thought he was a great candidate. I do. I want him to be, I want him to be involved in the administration. Like you said, I think we would do very well if he was involved in that administration. I want to touch on this idea of what are we actually conserving, right? How would you define that? What are we as conservatives in your mind and your vision supposed to be conserving as we call ourselves conservatives?
I know, right? Political conservatism. I actually just wrote an article. I'm kind of pitching it around right now. Hopefully it will get picked up. But political conservatism, we are supposed to be conserving those values that have made our nation who she is, that have made us strong and prosperous. You can kind of start off with the 1776 values. We're supposed to be conserving that, right? Like life, right? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Pursuit of happiness is really self-determination, that I get to decide what it is I want to do. So political conservatism, we're supposed to be conserving those values that have made our nation great, like life. We will protect life, like the right not just to think a thought, which is in our First Amendment, freedom of religion. Freedom of religion is not about freedom of which church you want to go to, freedom to be a Baptist versus a Catholic. No, it's freedom of conscience, that I have the freedom to think what I want to think.
That's right.
And not have the government to force their narrative into my thinking. But then there are 5 rights in the First Amendment. Freedom of religion followed immediately by freedom of speech, because not only do I have the right to think my thoughts, but I have the right to speak that thought out loud. These are some of the values that as conservatives we're supposed to be conserving. But then it goes on, right? The freedom, we're supposed to preserve the age-old right that parents get to decide the direction of their children, not the school board. We are supposed to preserve basic definitions like what it means to be a woman. We are to preserve the right, to bear arms, and just so many. You could just go down the Constitution, start with the first 5 rights in the First Amendment, and then move to the second and move on. We are supposed to be conserving those values that are the foundation upon which our nation exists. But the reality is that we are derelict in our duty. The reality is we have conserved absolutely none of the things that I just spoke about. We're supposed to preserve our border. Now, yes, we can point to the weaponization. We can point to the weaponization of our laws. We can point to the fact that, and I think this is something that I've heard you bring up before, that we don't have the same distribution outlets as the left have, right? That they have all of these different mediums that they can use to push their message.
That's right.
Laying that to the side. Yes, we can point to a lot of things. But going back to my 2022 race, how do you explain, one, we don't even, one particular person did not endorse me So how do you explain that? But then even more so, how do you explain conservatives on the ground not voting for me?
Mm-hmm.
Or voting for someone who would have been a rhino at best, right? Dr. Oz would have been a rhino on his best day.
Yeah.
But up to that election, he had never even shown an ounce of conservatism. Now I'm just using Dr. Oz, but I can look at, what just happened a couple of weeks ago with Representative Bob Good over in Virginia, who is the leader of the House Freedom Caucus. And up to this point, he's shown that he's willing to stand up for our values. And yet he's in a race now. They just had the election. It's a race too close to call. How do you go from winning by 15 points 2 years ago, by more than 15 points 2 years ago, to now being in a race that's too close to call, if conservatives have become derelict in our duties of understanding why we exist in the first place? We exist to conserve those values, but we failed on absolutely every single thing that matters. We have lost it all. Those things that matter to us, we've lost it. And so that's what it means to conserve. We have done abysmal.
Yeah, I agree.
In our job of conserving.
I think one of the things that we always seem to do is we always seem to be the side giving, right? We're giving. And I'm like,
Yep.
I don't know how you could be conserving anything if you just keep giving things away. At some point there's got to be.
We're giving it away. We're not fighting.
Yeah.
We're like, oh, I'm exhausted. I'm tired. Or we say, oh, well, it's God's will. God to figure it out. Listen,
Yeah.
I heard a pastor from Moody Bible say once, Jesus is not going to come down here and do what you're supposed to do.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
He's not going to come down here and do it, right? And once you get past Genesis chapter 3, you don't see God doing anything without cooperation from man/woman as well. But you don't see him doing anything beyond chapter 3 of Genesis, beyond him putting creating woman, and giving him dominion over the earth. So even, so a lot of us, you said you have a lot of Christians. So a lot of us like to fall back on, it's God's will. God to see it through. God. No, that's not how it works. And it's not biblical. You don't see God doing anything after Genesis chapter 3 without being in cooperation with man, even with Moses dividing the water. He had a role to play, however big, however small. And I could just go on and on about this because I'm a Christian.
No, I mean, it's a phenomenal point.
This is the lens through which I see things.
And I say, take the initiative, be the change. You have to do, if you know the difference between right and wrong, okay, but you decide not to do what's right, then essentially, I mean, I'll steal a line from the left, right? Silence is consent. But at some point, it becomes the truth. If we're going to stand by and watch it happen, there was a story. Kitty Genovese is a very famous story where a bunch of people, a mob, saw a woman getting raped, and they all thought somebody else was going to call the cops, and the woman wound up dying. It's a real story. And it's how, you pass on the accountability to somebody else. You pass on the responsibility to somebody else because there's so many other people. Some of my favorite commentators, they say, we are the leaders we've been waiting for, so get out and lead. It's time to stop being so complacent. And I think things are changing.